Hello everybody. Today we're breaking inside Spitfire Audio's head to find out their secrets. Made it. No, actually I'm not breaking in. I'm far, far away. However, today we are going... Where am I? Today we are going to take a forensic look at Spitfire Audio's original strings. And then we are going to build this. Our own free contact string library. But why? Now, this is not because we are stingy, nor because we want to rip off Spitfire Audio. Oh, this is a dodgy area. Anyway, the reason is because, Spitfire libraries are very widespread and everybody has them. It's good to have one orchestral library for sketching purposes, but once you want to cement yourself as a unique composer, you need to have your own sound to learn how to build your own instruments and save money down the line. Before we do that, we need to acquaint ourselves with the tools and principles
Although the instruments play the same note and their frequency spectrum is similar, the sounds possess different tones. Another thing that might strike some as odd is that a single note shows a few distinct frequency peaks. Picture a string tethered between 2 points, 0 and 1. When plucked or hit, it will oscillate along the axis indicated here by the red arrow. However, it will also start oscillating along half of its length, a third, and so on. These different oscillation modes sound with distinct frequencies. These oscillation modes and their respective frequencies are called overtones. You can visualize this exchange between the various oscillations on a guitar going through the stages. This cocktail of harmonics in a sound can be visualized in a spectrogram. Their position along the y-axis indicates their frequency and their brightness, their strength. You can hear the fundamental, the first overtone, second harmonic, third, fourth. These are distinct notes themselves. Combine them and you get a single piano note. So as we visualize the same note performed on the different instruments, we can see their DNA fingerprint. We can use this knowledge to deconstruct any sound and create our own, without deep sampling, with only a handful of recorded notes and some powerful knowledge. And this is precisely what we will attempt to do in this video.
I have the 3 Spitfire original strings. This is how the epic sounds like. The intimate. And this is how the cinematic Frozen sounds like. But for all these libraries, the pitch wheel is not doing anything. I analyzed a lot of keys, but I think I'm going to showcase only one because it makes the point and it's representative of the rest of the keys. Of course, each of the original series strings have a lot of articulations. I'm using the signature articulation of each, so the patch that defines the sound of the library.
This is Isotopes RX7. To orientate you, we have the same note, volume and dynamics matched of the signature patch for each of the libraries, Epic, Intimate and Frozen strings. Up and down you can see the stereo channel, the frequency is indicated to the left, and the brightness shows loudness. A few observations. Epic strings have a very well defined and louder higher overtones than the other libraries. Secondly, the Intimate and especially the Frozen strings have more enharmonic noise in between their upper harmonics. This is what the ear perceives as noise. This noise gives the strings its cinematic, airy quality. Another thing is that compared to the other two libraries, the Frozen strings have a low frequency rumble noise, probably contributing further to its cinematic character. Another observation is that the Intimate strings have little gaps, interruptions in their first few harmonics, including the fundamental, whereas Frozen strings have a straight, lush, stable first three low harmonics. Whereas Epic strings have a uniform attack in lower and higher harmonics, the other two libraries introduce upper harmonics progressively slower. This gives the strings a slow-moving cinematic feel where first the fundamental is defined, then the noise provides the ear with a texture, and finally the upper harmonics kick in to define the pitch. Since the ear is greatly impressed from the very first few moments of the attack, the character is established within the very first few milliseconds. So overall, what can we tell from this analysis? Spitfire is telling us progressively more enharmonic noise frequencies, going from Epic through Intimate to Frozen strings. While I was making this video, Spitfire Audio released Appassionata strings, and Paul Thompson introduced a fader that actually adds noise. It all makes sense. Enharmonic noise and slow introduction of upper harmonics make strings cinematic, and psychoacoustically it enhances the realism. By the way, I also noticed that Spitfire Audio use peculiar techniques when it comes to noise reduction. So what's the plan? How are we going to go about building our contact instrument? I tried different combinations of microphone setups, including the super close, a lapel mic clipped on the bridge of the cello, but I settled on two configurations. One configuration is recording from very close but playing very softly. Shh, at the edge of silence. And the other configuration is playing normal, recording from a bigger distance. For this I'm using the Zoom H1N recorder, which is about 80 euros. I'm going to record only 5 notes. There are no round robins involved. There's only one dynamic layer. I know that some prefer to have templates like David Hilowitz and Christian Hansen. There's nothing wrong with their approach. It's that I am more interested in creative sampling rather than deep sampling. I'm therefore not going to use a sampling template. After recording the samples, I'm going to denoise them in Isotopes RX7. I'll then import the recording to Cubase, where I'm going to treat it with free plugins, and then we're going to build the instrument in Kontakt. We first need to denoise our recording. I'm using Isotopes RX7, but one can use any free audio editor like Audacity. Let's play through our recording. We now realize the consequences of playing at the edge of silence, a high noise floor as compared to our signal. We open the spectral denoise module and find a region to generate our noise profile. This region sounds pretty good. We click Learn, and here you can see the red line representing the signal before denoising and the yellow line after denoising. The blue curve allows us to apply more denoise or less denoise depending on where on the frequency spectrum you are. We use the observations we made earlier from the Spitfire strings and apply differential denoise along the frequency spectrum. Overall, we do not really want to apply aggressive denoising because that will take some of the ambience that psychoacoustically contributes to the realism. Once we have decided on our settings, we select the region of interest and we click Process. As you can see, there was substantial removal of noise, but there is still some noise left. We save it and we proceed to our DAW of choice for further processing. Let's jump into Cubase. Because I am not one of London's best string players, actually I'm the worst player in the world, we realize that there are uneven phrases. To negate for the unevenness in my performance, we are going to select a short but consistent part and we are going to insert a plugin called Pol X Stretch. Now this plugin is for free, using granular synthesis to stretch the sample but also add interesting harmonics. First we're going to capture a very short sample of our performance and then we're going to stretch it. I usually like to stretch it around 3.5 times, and we are going to render the result out as an audio file. We have 15 seconds of pulse stretch, which gives a more even sound. We do this for all of our notes. The next thing I do to process my samples, Prebox by Analog Obsession, is a preamp emulation. I'm using this plugin to give my sample a warm sound. I apply this to all our notes and then I go to my master bus or the stereo output bus where I have a chain of effects that will be used to treat all samples. First I have, again by Analog Obsession, a room reverb, and this is just a short reverb to simulate the sound of a room. This is followed by Valhalla Room, and this is a reverb for the tail, just to give a more lush sound. And finally we finish it off with a passive EQ, again by Analog Obsession, a rare EQ, to boost a little bit the low end and to attenuate the high end, and then we export this as individual samples. Now these are the Edge of Silence samples, but for our normal samples we perform identical processing, apart from the fact that we use a cloner, which uses the tuning and delay to simulate 4 voices from 1. These samples are also exported, and we'll jump to Kontakt to build our instrument. Finally, here we are in Kontakt. In the browser on the left, we have our Edge of Silence samples that are labeled by key, and we can audition them. We need to double click in the empty space to create a new instrument, and then click on the ranch icon to enter the magical world of Kontakt. We activate the mapping and group editor. I'll rename the first group as Frost. We then assign our process samples to the right keys by drag and drop. And I will expand the key range by dragging the borders of the samples. Let's play. For the low key ranges, we can overlap our samples, then select all the zones and right click, select batch tools and auto apply X fades by key. What this achieves is a crossfade, a smooth gradation through the samples as we move across our key range. Next, we move to our volume modulation. Here we assign continuous controller 1, CC1, which happens to be our modulation wheel on our keyboard, to control the volume. As you can see, the volume has two modulators now, the velocity and the modulation wheel, CC1, set to affect the volume by around 60%. We then need to address the attack and release of our samples. At the bottom, we set the attack at around 700 to 800 milliseconds to model a slow string section, and we adjust the curve to a linear setting. Here we also need to set the release of our samples, somewhere 700-ish. And this will result in a smooth sample end, which will allow the node performance to model a legato-like transition. And now if I increase or decrease the modulation wheel, we can hear the volume increase or decrease. That's all for our first frosty layer. Now let's move on to the base layer. To create that, we duplicate the frosty first layer with all its samples. We rename the second group to base. And in the mapping editor, we delete the high key ranges and leave only the lowest 1.5 octaves. Most of these layers' properties remain the same, apart from two. We decrease the attack to make the onset of the sound faster than the first layer. We then add a one-band EQ where we increase the gain at around the 100 Hz mark to give some body and substance to the low end. Let's try. Great. We now have our two layers. Let's move on to the third and final layer of our instrument. We create this new layer by duplicating the previous layer. We name it Ice. This is where our normal performance samples will go. Now, since most of the mapping is similar to the previous layers, I will only highlight the differences. One difference is that we set the loop so that the samples move back and forth as long as the key is pressed. Another difference is that I added a low-pass filter whose cutoff is modulated by the modulation wheel CC1. So as I modulate up, the sample not only gets louder, it also gets brighter. Since the modulation wheel is 127 levels of continuous control, the gradation through the settings gives a sense of a detailed dynamic modulation. Finally, we set the attack to be longer, around 1.9 seconds, so it kicks in later than the frost layer, and that defines the pitch. To all of our three layers, we add a simple reverb to sonically join them together. Now we'll create a simple skin and take this instrument for a test drive.
Now let's take our frosty strings for a test drive. I'm going to be using the pitch wheel, the modulation wheel, the sustain pedal, and just the keyboard. So let's see. Let's go for a walk. I hope you found value in this video. And if you want to pick up the instrument for free, you're going to find the links in the description. Now, it's not about ripping off Spitfire Audio, it's about learning how to build our own contact or sample-based instruments, and it's easier than you think. You just need to know a few tricks. In the meantime,